Do you know Dwight Yoakam, one of country music's most enduring legends, was once told he didn't belong in Nashville? Long before the awards, the sold-out tours, and the silver screen cameos, he was the rejected outsider no one knew what to do with. But when Nashville shut its doors, Los Angeles opened another path that would test him, shape him, and eventually redefine what country music could be. Now, Dwight is finally speaking up about the rejection he faced and the side of Nashville that rarely makes it to the public eye. Dwight's rise to fame. Dwight Yoakam is definitely one of country music's most distinctive voices, the rare kind of artist who built a career on authenticity when the system didn't know what to do with him. But long before the awards, the movie roles, and the chart-topping albums, Dwight faced rejection from Nashville that completely changed his life and career. Dwight David Yoakam was born on October 23, 1956, in Pikeville, Kentucky, a coal country town where the radio was often the only link to the outside world. His family had relocated to Columbus, Ohio, looking for steadier work and a better life, and it was there that Dwight's creative streak began to take shape. In high school, he found himself constantly drawn to performing. He took on lead roles in school plays, showing early signs of the showmanship that would later define him on stage. Outside the classroom, he was often in someone's garage, guitar in hand, playing with local bands that covered everything from Merle Haggard to Elvis. Those small gigs and school productions may have seemed trivial at the time, but they were the foundation of something much larger, the first glimpse of an artist who refused to fit into one box. After graduation, Yoakam briefly attended Ohio State University, but the classroom couldn't hold him for long. The pull of music was too strong. College life seemed irrelevant compared to the thrill of writing songs, rehearsing late into the night, and imagining himself on a stage that actually mattered. So, after just a short while, he made a decision that many around him thought reckless. He dropped out, determined to chase music full-time. That decision eventually led him to Los Angeles, where Yoakam started performing in clubs like the Roxy and the Whiskey A Go-Go, places better known for punk and rock acts than for twangy guitars and cowboy boots. It was a strange mix. Country songs about heartache and hard living performed in venues built for rebellion. But somehow, it worked. Dwight's energy matched the punk spirit more than most country acts ever could. He brought the same intensity and defiance, just channeled through a different rhythm. This unexpected blend of sounds and audiences earned him a label that would follow him through his early career: cowpunk. This wasn't a term Dwight came up with himself, but it fit the scene. His music had all the storytelling and soul of classic country, but with fast tempos, driving guitars, and an edge that connected with people who'd never thought they'd enjoy country music. In 1984, after years of scraping by and playing anywhere that would have him, Yoakam recorded his debut EP, Guitars, Cadillacs, etc., etc. He financed it independently, a risk that could have gone nowhere, but thankfully, it didn't. The sound was pure Dwight, sharp, emotional, unapologetically traditional, yet modern in its attitude. Word spread quickly through LA's music circles, and before long, Reprise Records took notice. When the label reissued the EP as a full album in 1986, it exploded. The record shot to #1 on Billboard's Country Albums chart, and suddenly, Dwight Yoakam was no longer just the guy playing honky-tonk tunes in rock clubs. He was a breakout star. The singles Honky Tonk Man and Guitars, Cadillacs became national hits, proof that his instincts had been right all along, that there was still a huge audience hungry for real country music with grit and style. His voice felt like something out of another era, yet it sounded completely fresh in a time when country radio was leaning toward pop production and polished ballads. And as the album's success grew, so did his reputation as one of the most original voices in the genre. Yet, beneath that success was a quiet tension. Nashville's gatekeepers weren't quick to embrace the outsider who'd proven them wrong, and this tension between his undeniable talent and the rejection that followed him, even after success, would soon become one of the defining struggles of his career. Personal challenges and struggles. Fame didn't come to Dwight Yoakam through a golden door. It came through grit, rejection, and a stubborn belief that his way was the only way worth following. When Dwight first landed in Los Angeles, the city was nothing like the home he'd left behind in Ohio. There were no familiar hills, no front porches, and no comfort in the way people talked or lived. It was loud, restless, and full of people chasing the same vague idea of success. He didn't have money, and he didn't have connections. In fact, he played wherever he could, including tiny clubs, half-empty bars, and late-night gigs where the audience cared more about beer than about the music. For a long time, it felt like shouting into the wind. Those years were marked by long stretches of loneliness. He lived modestly, sometimes barely scraping together enough to keep going. The dream of making music was still alive, but it came with constant reminders of how easily it could disappear. There were nights when the applause was polite at best, and mornings when he wondered if anyone really cared about what he was trying to do. LA could be ruthless that way, a city where ambition and self-doubt often lived side by side. What made it harder was that Dwight wasn't the type to open up about how he felt. He kept most of his emotions to himself, wearing confidence like armor even when he was uncertain inside. Friends and collaborators have often described him as intensely private, someone who preferred to process his struggles alone rather than turn them into public confessions. In interviews, he rarely spoke about pain or fear. He talked about the work, the craft, and the music. But behind that professional calm was a man trying to hold steady under the pressure of proving himself in an industry that didn't easily accept outsiders. Even after success arrived, it didn't erase those early insecurities. The crowds got bigger, but the expectations grew too. The critics who once ignored him began watching closely, some still doubting that a man who came up through LA's rock clubs could ever be a real country star. Traditionalists in Nashville viewed him with suspicion. To them, his sound was too sharp, his style too rebellious, and his image too unconventional. Dwight heard the whispers, and though he's never responded publicly with anger, he carried that rejection quietly. It fueled him, but it also wore him down. Every show had to prove a point, and every record needed to remind people he wasn't some novelty from California. His entire career became a statement of defiance, proof that tradition and originality could exist in the same breath. Through the 1990s and 2000s, he kept a punishing pace. While many artists slowed down once they reached stability, Dwight did the opposite. He was always on the road, sometimes performing over 100 shows a year. Touring was his lifeline, the place where he felt most in control. But the grind took its toll. Constant travel, late nights, and the physical demands of performing began to catch up with him. His devotion to music often came at the expense of rest, and the lines between passion and exhaustion blurred. He wasn't just dealing with the strain of the road. Years of living in the spotlight created their own kind of pressure. Maintaining success meant living under constant scrutiny, not just from the media, but from himself. You see, Dwight had built a reputation on precision, from the way he dressed to how every note landed in a song. That perfectionism made his work exceptional, but it also left little room for mistakes or vulnerability. When things got tough, he didn't talk about it. He simply worked harder. In more recent years, reports have surfaced suggesting he's faced health scares, though details have remained private. True to his nature, Dwight never turned those moments into public narratives. There were no emotional interviews or long explanations. Instead, he chose resilience, continuing to record, perform, and appear on stage with the same energy that defined his early career. Fans noticed the difference in his pace at times, but they also saw the determination that kept him moving. Part of what made his struggles both admirable and difficult to see was his refusal to compromise. Throughout his life, he's often repeated the idea that it's better to fail while being true to yourself than to succeed by pretending to be someone else. That philosophy shaped everything, from his sound to his look and his choices. It's what kept him out of Nashville's inner circle for years, but also what made him one of the most respected artists of his generation. That independence came with isolation. The music industry thrives on relationships, but Dwight always kept a certain distance. He worked closely with musicians and producers, yet few were ever truly inside his personal world. He protected that space fiercely, and over time, it became part of his identity. The mysterious figure in the hat and tight jeans, always slightly out of reach. There were moments when the weight of that privacy became visible through small signs of fatigue, brief absences from public life, and stretches where he seemed to retreat completely. Yet, each time he returned with new work that reminded everyone why he mattered. His songs carried the tension of a man who'd seen enough disappointment to know how fragile success can be, but who refused to let it define him. And a huge part of this strength came from his love life and family. Love life and family. For all the fame Dwight Yoakam earned on stage, his personal life has always moved quietly in the background. He built a career on individuality and public presence, yet he's one of the few stars of his generation who managed to keep his private world almost completely his own. In March 2020, Dwight quietly married Emily Joyce, a photographer he had been with for over a decade. Their relationship wasn't one that played out in tabloids or on social media. They had built their life together long before the wedding, choosing patience over spectacle. When they finally married, the world was already in lockdown. The ceremony took place in a small private setting with only a few witnesses. There were no flashing cameras or celebrity guests, just two people making a commitment in the middle of global uncertainty. It was understated, personal, and perfectly in tune with the way Dwight has always handled things that matter most to him. That same year, their first child was born. It was a rare glimpse into a side of him that fans had only ever imagined, the family man and the father. Even then, he didn't share many details. There were no big public announcements beyond a few confirmed statements. In an age when almost everything is broadcast online, Dwight continued to draw a line between the stage and his home. But before Emily, his love life had often been the subject of speculation. He had been linked to several well-known women over the years, among them actress Sharon Stone, model and writer Karen Duffy, and fellow country singer Wynonna Judd. None of those relationships were ever officially confirmed or discussed at length, which only added to his quiet mystique. The press may have tried to fill in the blanks, but Dwight rarely indulged curiosity when it came to his love life. What stood out through all of this was how different he was from the image people often attach to country stars. There were no public romances, no messy breakups, and no tell-all interviews. Dwight never seemed interested in turning his personal experiences into headlines. For someone who built a career out of emotional honesty in his music, he drew a clear boundary between storytelling and self-exposure. He could write about heartbreak and loneliness in a way that made listeners feel like he was speaking directly from experience. But he never felt the need to confirm which stories were his. Unlike many artists of his stature, Dwight isn't one to post personal photos or share stories too close to home. When he does make public appearances, Emily occasionally joins him, but the focus remains on the work. Their marriage seems grounded in the same quiet understanding that marked his career, with no need to prove anything and no desire to compete for attention. Much of that restraint can be traced back to his upbringing. Dwight was raised in a working-class family that valued privacy and hard work over attention. His parents weren't entertainers or dreamers. They were practical people who believed that effort mattered more than recognition. Dwight grew up in that environment, surrounded by traditional values and a strong sense of independence. His family's Christian faith shaped his outlook early on, not in a strict or performative way, but through his parents living out their beliefs day to day. That moral grounding stayed with him long after he left home. Even as his career took him into the chaos of Los Angeles and the unpredictability of fame, he carried those small-town principles of discipline, humility, and a belief in doing things the right way, even if it took longer. And that's why the rejection he faced from Nashville cut deeper than most people realized. The Nashville Rejection. When Dwight Yoakam first tried to break into Nashville, he arrived, expecting that the capital of country music would welcome someone who lived and breathed the genre. Instead, he found a system that couldn't make sense of him. From the beginning, the Nashville executives didn't know where to place him. His music sounded familiar, but didn't fit the polished direction of the 1980s country scene. At a time when slick production and crossover appeal were becoming the standard, Yoakam's stripped-down twang felt like a step backward. Executives told him his sound was too retro, his lyrics too rough, and his look too unconventional. To them, it wasn't marketable. At first, Dwight tried to play by the rules, auditioning wherever he could, hoping that live performance might do what demos couldn't. One of those chances came at the Grand Ole Opry, the most sacred stage in country music. But even there, the response was lukewarm. Instead of an official spot on the Opry lineup, he was offered a side gig at their amusement park, performing as an alternate when the main acts weren't on. It was a polite dismissal, wrapped in professional courtesy. Nashville wasn't rejecting him outright, it was just making sure he stayed on the margins. Yoakam's influences didn't help his case with the industry. His sound leaned heavily toward the Bakersfield tradition, the West Coast movement shaped by Buck Owens and Merle Haggard that valued electric guitars, sharp rhythm, and a working-class edge. By the time Dwight came along, Nashville had spent years trying to move away from that sound. They were pushing country toward a smoother, more radio-friendly formula, and Dwight's Bakersfield twang didn't fit the mold. To the executives who ran Music Row, it was outdated, something that might appeal to older audiences, but not to the new generation they were trying to reach. That attitude didn't just frustrate him, it alienated him. In interviews years later, Dwight spoke about how the system in Nashville seemed built around songwriters rather than performers. The industry valued those who could craft hits for others over those who wanted to bring their own voice and style to the stage. For someone like Dwight, whose entire identity revolved around live performance, that model felt suffocating. He wanted to perform his songs, not sell them. He wanted to connect with audiences directly, not hand his stories over to someone else to sing. But this rejection wasn't a single moment, it was a pattern. Each meeting, each showcase, and each polite dismissal carried the same unspoken message. His music didn't belong there. And the frustration grew deeper with every door that closed. When he later spoke with Dan Rather, Dwight recalled those years with disappointment. He talked about how the city's industry machine seemed to run on habit, a formula where everything had to sound a certain way to be accepted. And in another interview, he explained that Nashville had become resistant to anything that didn't fit its frame. He explained that Nashville, for all its pride and tradition, often struggled to accept anything truly traditional unless it came packaged in a modern wrapper. Dwight wasn't the only one turned away for refusing to compromise, but he was one of the few who turned that rejection into a badge of honor. Instead of bending his sound to fit the system, he started to imagine what success might look like outside it. That decision marked the turning point of his career. Nashville had shut its doors, but in doing so, it had pushed him toward a path that would eventually redefine modern country music. At the time, though, it felt like failure. He had done everything he thought a country artist was supposed to do: write original songs, honor tradition, and play with passion. And still, the city that claimed to represent those values wouldn't take him in. He left with disappointment, but also with conviction. If Nashville didn't want his music, he would find the audience that did. That moment of exile was the spark behind his next move, a bold decision that would take him far from the southern heart of country music and into a scene that couldn't have been more different. He packed his guitar, left behind the polite rejections, and headed west to Los Angeles, a place where country and punk shared the same smoky bars and the same restless energy. And in that unlikely new city, surrounded by rockers, dreamers, and misfits, he finally found the freedom that Nashville never gave him: going rogue. Los Angeles, in the late 1970s, was a place of noise and contrast. The city's clubs were filled with punk, rock, and experimental acts, a restless mix of sounds that had little patience for polish or tradition. To most people, a twangy guitar had no place in that scene, but Yoakam saw something different. He understood that country and punk weren't opposites at all. Both represented people who lived outside the mainstream. Soon enough, this blend began to draw attention. People who'd never cared about country music were suddenly showing up to his small shows. The local press started using the term cowpunk to describe what he was doing. And while the label wasn't perfect, it captured the spirit of his sound, traditional roots music with modern urgency. The more he played, the more it became clear that Yoakam wasn't just performing country music, he was reviving it. By the late 1980s, what started as a small West Coast movement had become a nationwide success. Dwight Yoakam's albums were climbing charts and filling arenas. He wasn't just succeeding despite Nashville's rejection, he was thriving without it. Over the course of his career, he sold more than 25 million albums worldwide, placing him among the most successful independent country artists in history. What made that success even more striking was how consistent his music remained. He didn't abandon the sound that got him ignored in the first place. He simply found the audience Nashville didn't believe existed. Artists like Brad Paisley, Chris Stapleton, and Sturgill Simpson would later credit Yoakam's independence and authenticity as part of what made it possible for them to take creative risks within the genre. But Yoakam's reach didn't stop at music. By the 1990s, he began branching out into acting, taking on roles that showed another side of his talent. He appeared in Sling Blade alongside Billy Bob Thornton, earning praise for his restrained, believable performance. Later, he played key roles in films like Panic Room and Crank, balancing music and acting without turning one into a publicity tool for the other. His film work brought him into a wider public eye, but it never overshadowed his music. Even as Hollywood noticed him, he kept recording, experimenting, and touring. He continued to defy the limits of genre, moving easily between country, rock, and pop influences. One of the most striking examples came decades into his career, with his 2012 album, 3 Pairs. Produced in part with Beck, the record didn't sound like a throwback or a nostalgia project. It was a modern, layered take on his classic sound. Critics called it one of his strongest works, proof that he was still evolving rather than repeating himself. Through all of it, Dwight Yoakam managed to stay distinct. While many of his peers shifted toward radio-friendly formulas or followed trends, he kept building on the foundation he laid in those early LA clubs. His influence today can be heard in countless artists who mix old and new, traditional and experimental. Yoakam's career became a kind of blueprint for how to succeed outside the gatekeeping of Nashville, through persistence and clarity about what kind of artist he wanted to be. And now, long after his first rejection and his rise to fame, where is Dwight Yoakam today, and how has he managed to keep his fire burning after all these years? Where is Dwight now? Nearly 5 decades after he first set out on his own, Dwight Yoakam hasn't slowed down. If anything, he's still proving that independence and longevity can coexist in an industry that rarely allows both. At 69, he continues to work on his own timeline, still driven by the same creative restlessness that took him from the clubs of Los Angeles to the top of the country charts. In November 2024, Yoakam released Brighter Days, his first studio album in over 9 years, a record that feels both familiar and fresh. The project revisits the sharp songwriting and stripped-down arrangements that defined his early work, but it also stretches into unexpected territory. He brought in a mix of collaborators that surprised even longtime fans, including Post Malone and actress-singer Malin Akerman. Their contributions added a new dimension to Yoakam's sound, not trendy, but genuinely collaborative. The album also includes a handful of Carter family covers, a nod to the deep roots of American country that Yoakam has always respected. Critics described Brighter Days as a return to form, but Yoakam never really left. He just took his time. The album's themes of endurance, renewal, and the passage of time fit where he is now. An artist who's still searching for new ways to say what he's always known. Following the release, he launched the Cosmic Roundup and Rodeo Tour in 2025, a high-energy series of shows that span the US and parts of Europe. Sharing the bill with artists like the Mavericks and Joshua Ray Walker, the tour brings together generations of country musicians who share a respect for authenticity over image. Despite his long career, Yoakam has resisted nostalgia. His shows blend his familiar hits with new material that stands comfortably beside them. He performs each song with the same precision and drive, not as a throwback, but as a continuation of the story he's been telling since he first stepped on stage. At home, Yoakam remains based in Los Angeles, the city that shaped his identity as an outsider and innovator. He still runs his own label, maintaining complete control over his music and image. For him, independence isn't just a business choice, it's part of who he is. He manages releases, tours, and collaborations through his own team, keeping his career grounded in personal decision-making rather than corporate planning. In recent years, Yoakam has also leaned into digital platforms, finding a new audience online. His performances, interviews, and behind-the-scenes clips regularly attract hundreds of thousands of views. For an artist who built his reputation in the analog era, he's adapted with ease, using digital spaces to connect directly with listeners without losing his low-key presence. What stands out most today is how respected he's become across the entire music spectrum. Younger artists often cite him as an example of how to navigate fame without compromise. His name comes up not only in country circles, but also in discussions about the broader evolution of American roots music. And whenever he's interviewed, Yoakam continues to speak candidly about the dangers of conformity in the industry, about how easy it is to lose direction when success becomes the goal instead of the byproduct. Today, Dwight Yoakam is still every bit the figure he set out to be. Active, relevant, and unshaken by time. His songs still carry the edge of someone who remembers what it felt like to be told no, and his career remains a quiet rebuke to the system that once tried to define him. He's living proof that in country music, and in art in general, the long road can lead exactly where you were meant to go all along. What do you think about how Nashville treated Dwight Yoakam? Drop your answers in the comments section below. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to click on the next video on your screen, like this video, and subscribe to our channel for more updates.